Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. This is Anthony Otero, community lead for HR University, and today we have a special guest in our series of HR stories driving change and culture. We have Chief People Officer from Omada Health, Nancy Vitale. Nancy, welcome.
Thanks, Anthony. Glad to be here.
Yes, yes. So, Nancy, can you talk to us about your career journey and how does one get to be an executive in HR,
Yeah,
a chief executive of HR?
many paths to this role. Mine actually started when I was a sophomore in college, of all things. I was studying I had an organizational psychology course, and it really prompted and piqued my interest in the subject matter. And it led me to explore, like, what could I do with this from a career perspective? And ultimately ended up getting a business degree with a human resources focus. I've spent most of my career, though, at big corporations: Deloitte Consulting, Cigna, Gillette, then Procter and Gamble, Genentech, then Roche. And then back in 2019, I left the corporate world out of I would say, a yearning to do something different. And I started and ran my own consultancy for 3 years. But out of
Nice.
that experience, I really miss being part of a bigger team and a bigger purpose. And that's when I joined Omada Health back in 2022, because it ticked off a lot of boxes for me: mission driven, visionary CEO, great chemistry with the executive team. And ultimately, like, here I am 2.5 years later. So many paths to this particular seat and this role. And I'm grateful for the experiences that I had across many different industries and a lot of different companies.
Awesome, awesome. Can you talk to us a little bit about your current role as CPO in terms of scope of responsibilities in HR, direct reports, centers of excellence? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, I would say I view myself as an executive and as an enterprise business leader. I partner very closely with my executive colleagues to set Omada's strategy, to deliver against our business objectives, and ultimately help us realize our vision and our mission. And then, secondly, I am Omada's Chief People Officer, where I lead our people and culture team. I'm really centered on our team purpose, which is to help each Omadan be at their best and do their best work. And I essentially lead and support the team that is accountable for the entire employee life cycle, which spans from recruiting and hiring to onboarding and developing, to engaging and rewarding, and to offboarding and celebrating those that move on to other career opportunities. You asked the question, like, how big is our team? Our team is about 20 people total. That includes me. And I have
Yeah.
5 total direct reports that comprise a series of centers of excellence and some HR business partners that own different parts of the business as well.
Excellent, excellent. Um, Want to get into you know employee engagement and culture. Definitely, I've noticed that in Omada, we're certified as a great place to work. Right? There's so much conversation about kind of the employer value proposition, right? And certainly claiming and being awarded that title is certainly speaks volumes. Can you talk a little bit about the organizational decision to pursue that type of goal and kind of the journey to be recognized in that capacity?
Definitely. Well, first of all, I would say earning a Great Place to Work certification, from my view, really validates that we've created a positive employee experience for our Omadans. We call our employees Omadans. And I
Nice.
believe it really elevates our status too as an employer of choice. And certification supports our belief that our employees love working here, and it signals to the marketplace that we're committed to really nurturing a positive culture and to ensuring we have an overall healthy organization. I would say our journey is ongoing. Like, achieving the certification isn't the end game here. So we did set out a couple of years ago to just understand where we are relative to the threshold of being a great place to work. But our longer term aspiration is to be viewed as a best place to work. And we've got some work to do to get there, but that means really being humble to understand the areas of opportunity and to work over time to address those gaps. So, you put out this survey and this methodology. It really centers around understanding your levels of trust, pride and camaraderie in the organization and how people experience their leaders, their work, and their team. And I would say whether or not you get certified as a company, the methodology itself and the assessment really provide you valuable insights to understand your strengths and your areas of opportunity.
Absolutely. Definitely talking about, sometimes it's the journey is more valuable than the destination, right? In terms of, getting line managers or leaders on board. How are you and or your team was able to sell the proposition that this is not only the right thing to do, but in terms of investing the time, right? Use day-to-day business initiatives, but then, there needs to be a carve out in order to focus on this. Can you talk at a high level? How was that like?
Yeah, I don't think it was a particularly difficult sell. I think
Okay,
it was very much a part of our desire in terms of understanding how we continue to uh, live the culture that we espouse.
sure,
And we have done engagement surveys in the past. I think what was really particularly appealing to our leadership was understanding if we had what it took to enter the realm of those other companies that are really viewed as a great place to work, and did we hit that threshold. So it wasn't a particularly difficult sell. I think what remains is the commitment to inspect those results and to understand really what are the things that are speaking to our organization, our Omadans, and what are the things that we continue to need to work on, but very much centered around our values. And it really fit nicely in terms of how do we continue to just stay fresh and on top
right.
of understanding what we continue to need to do. To your point, it's a journey. It's not an ultimate destination because you have to constantly nurture culture. Culture happens whether you nurture it or not. The key is are you obtaining the culture that you desire?
Noted, noted. Thank you for taking a deeper dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you a little bit about your kind of your earlier experiences in Gentech. Seems like there were, transformations from a cultural perspective. Um, what were, and as well as diversity initiatives, it seems like as well. What were the key initiatives that contributed in those successes? Because these are large changes, it seems that we're implementing.
Yeah, you mentioned cultural transformation. You mentioned DEI, diversity initiatives. I really believe that culture and DEI in many ways go together. And so for much of my time at Genentech, we were really focused on many facets of diversity and inclusion. But I'll provide an example of gender diversity specifically and how that enabled our achievement of transformation and ultimately business results, because I think there's a common thread throughout. We were heavily influenced by the research of the Healthcare Business Women's Association, or HBA for short. And I think it was back in about 2010 when we started to get more focused and disciplined on many of the facets from their EDGE study that essentially really enabled us to ultimately achieve 50-50 gender representation throughout all levels of the organization, including the senior ranks. So let me give you a couple examples of
Sure.
what that entailed. One of the actions we took was to require the executive team during our talent review process to discuss each and every senior director woman and to explain if and why they were not on a vice president succession plan and what it would take to develop them to actually get on one of those plans. And then we aggregated the development themes for our director level women and focused our development efforts to really shore up those gaps. And I'll share with you an interesting comparison point that this analysis yielded for us. One of the top development gaps for our director level men was strategic thinking. And that particular skill was not one of the top gaps for our director level women. But for women, one of the top gaps was lack of confidence and assertiveness. And we were then able to target our development efforts to really close those respective gaps. I'll give you another example of some of the actions we took, and that was to really equalize parental leave for men and women. The
Sure.
evidence shows, that if dads can take comparable time off to care for their newborns, women can and should also take that time off without a negative impact to their career. And as the saying goes, a rising tide, raises
That's all both
all
right.
boats. Exactly.
Yes,
But
yes, yes.
yeah, and then let me just share with you one more
Please,
comment
please.
as it relates to gender diversity. We set out with a long-term horizon, and I'm talking, Anthony, a decade or more kind of as our horizon. And I left the company about 5 years ago, but for the first time in their history, Genentech recently named a woman as their CEO, and she is someone who rose up through the ranks of the company. So
Yeah,
the diversity and inclusion of women really created a more equitable culture at Genentech. And I believe that when you look at the correlation to the business measures like revenue growth, profitability, innovation, Genentech is living proof of why businesses should want to create an environment that is diverse, inclusive, and equitable, really on all fronts, not only gender,
absolutely.
but race, ethnicity, orientation. And I'll share one last comment, which is it's hard for me to really comprehend why DEI is a controversial issue in some circles today, as the focus on DEI seems to me, based on my own experiences, to be a business imperative and enable culture transformation, change, and ultimately results. And I've seen it firsthand how it can really advance important initiatives and create greater shareholder value.
Absolutely. And I think, you hit um a couple of great points, and you talk about someone that it sounds like you who knew was in the bench of Gentech now, as a senior leader, and also kind of rounding out um, the talent, right, in terms of certain talent may not have this um, strength and et cetera, and how do we try to, or in your case, your company, your former company tries to kind of round that out, and I think that's really powerful, right, to try to stretch the human capital in the organization as much as you can. So those are very insightful um, examples.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
one thing, but it's the combination of many things that really sets the stage for that to happen.
absolutely. No, I think that's great. You mentioned earlier in our conversation, not only you view yourself, as a obviously the chief people officer, you view yourself as an enterprise leader, speaking the language of business. That being said, want to ask you, kind of in Gentech and as well as Gillette, there were some business decisions that were made in regards to mergers and divestment strategies. Can you talk about the HR strategies you partnered with other enterprise leaders to manage and support employee morale during that time period?
Absolutely. I think there's, a combination of different strategies and tactics that really enabled those mergers, acquisitions, integrations to ultimately be successful. It's as simple as it sounds. One of the things I'd point to is open and transparent communication and lots of managerial listening. Those are some of the keys. I remember learning about Procter and Gamble's acquisition of Gillette on the late night news of all things. But going into work the next day and every day thereafter was a commitment to really helping employees understand the why behind the
Sure,
acquisition, which was truly an integration of two powerhouse consumer goods companies. One that was a market leader in marketing to men, that was Gillette. The other was a leader in marketing to women, that was P&G. Another thing I would say is, with this in mind, so many people experience so much loss during an acquisition or a merger. Identity, job security, relationships, understanding the way things get done. And now all of that is shifting, and the list goes on. And even if you don't know the answers or can't share the answers, it's important to convey empathy, to reinforce what you do know, or to provide a timeline for when you will have answers and then get back to folks with those answers. And finally, just to provide, outlets for support. Another important thing from my experiences is to be sure to honor the acquired company's history and heritage.
Sure.
I'll share a lesson learned story with you, Anthony. When Roche acquired Genentech, they immediately removed Genentech's long time tagline, which was "in business for life." And they displayed it on a go forward presentation with a red circle and a line through it as if to say, this company tagline is dead. This company is dead. And looking back, they could have still conveyed that brand change, but in a different way, one that honored the heritage, the legacy, and the
Right.
identity to Genentechers of what in business for life meant to us, which was really
Right.
saving lives. But fast forward a little bit later, Roche supported our new brand campaign of Everyday Epic and what that represented, which was ultimately the little things day in and day out that lead to breakthrough innovation, which benefited both Genentech and Roche as one company. So, ultimately, I really respected Roche for embracing this in the end, because I think that was a really pivotal point, a unifying point to say, what do we represent? And let's make sure we honor heritage and legacy at the
Right.
same time that we're moving towards something new and unique together.
I think that's powerful, right? Because the company that is getting acquired, they've obviously had been successful to get to a certain point. So it's not as if, let's disregard everything, right? You want to take the best of the legacy and the heritage and bring and kind of merge that together into something new. And so I think, and one of the things too, and I'm so glad you're on this webinar is HR is a business function as well as a people function, and being able to understand the nuances of communication is important. And what I'm hearing is, there's no such thing as an over communication. Even there's certain things that you may not be able to share at a certain point in time, but folks don't want to feel forgotten about. Or and you mentioned, in terms of having space for outlets for resources and conversation. So that's definitely helpful. Um, I want to ask you about another experience you've had, and I'm very curious about this. So you worked at Cigna, and want to get your perspective on kind of employee development, growth and development. Um, my understanding, you built, there was a sales training program, and kind of want to understand a little bit more about that. Kind of like how was that pitch? Was that original curriculum? Was that you partnered with someone, and what was the process for something like that? Because I'm sure it must have been quite an investment in terms of time and energy.
Yeah. And it goes to your point, Anthony, about what HR can deliver, not just as a people function, but as a business function. I'm going to tie those 2 points together. So we developed this program called Business Leadership and Sales Training, or BLAST. And it was really the brainchild of my then boss and lifelong mentor, Cindy Donnelly, who was the HR head for our division at the time. And our group insurance division was struggling. And we needed to pivot the business from pursuing only jumbo clients to also pursuing more mid-market clients to really capture more of the market that was out there and available. And
Sure.
this really entailed a shift in our sales strategy as well as our sales force. And we needed more sales representatives, and we couldn't afford to recruit them from other companies, try to lure them away from other companies, or even recruit from top tier universities. So instead, we focused on recruiting and hiring young, eager talent from great second tier colleges. And we ultimately developed a 6-month development program teaching these recent grads about the business itself, the business we were in, our industry, and how to effectively sell. So a designed curriculum to help impart selling skills to fit the needs of our business. And they learned from industry veterans who taught them the ropes A to Z.
Hmm.
And we gave them field mentors to guide them through their first months out in the field as they were starting to practice the skills that they gained until ultimately we gave them their own territories to canvas. So it was an incredibly successful program that developed these young grads into, I would classify them as high performing sales professionals, which
Sure.
in large part enabled our turnaround of the business from year over year earnings declines to growth and profitability. So a real direct tie between what was the business need, what was our strategy, and how did this hiring and development program directly tie to enable us to achieve the business objectives that we had set out to achieve.
This this is a perfect example, to our audience out there, how HR can add value to the business, and think about the amount of dollars that were not only saved but created, because this was an internal uh, program to upskill talent. So it was a whole multi-pronged approach in terms of the recruitment piece, and acquiring talent that was willing to be trained, and then not only in terms of the dollars potentially saved on the training side, but also the dividends in terms of the sales. So I think this is Nancy. I had to ask you this question because
No.
in terms of like ways that HR can add value to the business, quantitatively as well. I think that's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the interest of time, I'm just going to want to pivot a little bit.
Sure.
Um, Want to ask you, kind of where you see the workforce today. What do you think are the key elements, at a high level in terms of having a resilient workforce or building a workforce that's, resilient?
Yeah, it's funny you asked this because I had a recent exchange with our CEO and our president about a video clip of NVIDIA's CEO, who's getting a lot of attention these days, talking about this very point.
Yeah.
And that NVIDIA CEO Jensen, his perspective is that there is no way around building resilience without a healthy dose of pain and suffering. And his point is that resiliency and character come out of suffering. Now, you don't want to artificially manufacture the suffering of your employees to build resilience, clearly. But I do think there is something to be said about recruiting and hiring employees who have had some dose of hardship to overcome in their own lives, whether that be personally or professionally. So think about who you're hiring and bringing in, and what is the
Mhm.
evidence that they are bringing resiliency with them. I would also say that businesses naturally go through cycles, ups and downs. So when a company goes through a downturn or faces a difficult hurdle, I think it's important to help employees understand the business that you're in, as well as the market that you're competing within, and what has changed, like what is actually happening around you that is causing this downturn or this hurdle. And it's important to have ongoing transparency and openness so that folks have really a full view regarding the challenges and opportunities that you're facing at your company and or within their team. Like, treat people as adults who, with the right mindset, will have the confidence to overcome those challenges and obstacles. And then I'd say finally, role modeling and leadership are also really key here. So making sure that you hire and promote resilient leaders, that can also go a long way to cultivating a resilient workforce. We talk about the shadow that leaders cast is long. If they're casting resilience, employees, team members, they will pick up on that.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, thank you for answering that. Wanted to ask you a little bit about think organization is part of well-being. Can you talk a little bit about it? I understand you're a co-founder. Talk to our audience a little bit about what it is, and kind of what it's the mission of the organization.
Yeah, I have been a student of well-being for quite some time,
Excellent.
and the need for a holistic approach to well-being is clear to me in organizations. And as you address employee needs, there's multitude of components that go into this, but essentially there's 4 or 5 key elements. People in general have a need for meaning and purpose in their lives. They have a need for human connection and interaction. They have a need for a sense of financial well-being. Do I have the means and resources to lead the independent life that I desire? And the need for mind and body health. And so, as we think about even the last few years, the pandemic itself brought a major focus to mental health. After the pandemic, there was and remains a major focus on work flexibility, while at the same time of ensuring social well-being. What I see now is a revitalized focus on physical health. I would say even from the perch that I sit at Omada, so much attention on obesity and chronic conditions that employers are really trying to figure out how to address those needs and desires of their workforce for access to medicines like GLP-1s and ongoing support for weight management and treating chronic conditions. So ultimately, what I think is important for an individual organization to do is to articulate how specifically is their employee value proposition uniquely addressing the different facets of well-being so that their workforce is clear on what their organization supports and what it doesn't support regarding their well-being needs. And I'll mention, I recently learned of this term called care washing that was in a recent HBR article. And care washing is about covering up or putting a misleading spin or a failure to meet some commitment or stated claim. An example of that might be like offering a yoga class as evidence for supporting a healthy organization and addressing well-being needs. But if the managers inside the organization are assigning projects to people to complete over the weekends or during their vacation time off, the yoga class is simply, what we would call as window dressing. So I think what's really important in all of this work is to ensure that your espoused culture is aligned with your experienced or lived culture, whatever that may be, and to not try to portray well-being window dressing if the culture doesn't support it. So in essence, going back to these anchors around what are my employees' needs for meaning and purpose, and is it clear in terms of what they're able to achieve in terms of meaning and purpose at this organization? Human connection, interaction,
Yep.
mind, body health. It's touching upon each of those facets.
Excellent. That sounds exciting. Nancy, we had a couple of questions, but I'm going to forego that in the interest of time. There's a shout out, and then there was one question from the audience, and we'll see how far we'll go because it's just so much insight. So we got a shout out from Demario Bell to you, Nancy. So true, Nancy. Culture happens whether you nurture it or not. Okay. And then we have Shivari, and Shivari, I'll also try to respond. I think Nancy will be heading out in a few minutes, but it sounds, Shivari, you're from across the pond, so I'm going to assume you're from Europe. So shout out to Europe. Um, so hi, Nancy and Anthony. Thank you so much. Loving the conversation. I have two questions, if we have time. The initiatives you implemented at Gentech should sound incredibly valuable for any global corporation. What do you think is required for an organization to see the value in focusing on retention slash development as well as recruitment of diverse individuals? So in essence, Nancy, what's the value add of focusing on retention? I'll just add as well, as a myself working in HR, it's brain drain, right? When you leave when talent leaves an organization, the cost to rehire, there's a period where production inevitably falls just because there's less headcount, and then to get someone to get on the learning curve and learn the culture. So I think very high level. I think that's something that it benefits an organization if incumbents are the right fit to try to retain them. Nancy, any comments or thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's right, Anthony. The only other thing I'd say is, for Shivari, if you're faced with a certain set of circumstances at your organization, like leverage tools that are available out there to help you hone in on the messaging. There's so many AI tools that are available, Chat GPT, like if there's a particular case you're trying to build or a particular way you're trying to message the case for investment or the case for like what are the savings that are going to be attributed to us being able to increase retention. Leverage the tools that are available out there, because it'll help give you a starting point for that. But being able to translate just the stability that a highly capable and retained organization can deliver against a strategy, and one that is staying on top of skills, is an important component to consider as you're articulating that to your leaders.
Okay, great. Last question before we head out. Someone interested in pursuing a career in culture and change management, what kinds of roles, experiences, opportunities do you think provide the best training early on in a career? I'll just quickly say, if assuming you want to remain in HR, probably recruitment, because you have a direct um, impact of kind of impacting the cultures in terms of you're interviewing for the organization. But I don't know, Nancy, you may have a different opinion, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So just want to make sure that last question is just answered before we
Yeah,
wrap up.
absolutely. I don't think there's one like right answer here. I think there's so many facets of human resources that can really provide a great entry point. I started, my HR career in a junior HR business partner role. I know others who have had successful careers started out in people operations, others in recruiting, as you've articulated. If you have an OD degree, like learning and development in OD is a great starting point. If you have a focus in compensation, I don't think there's one right answer. What I would encourage people early in their career is to get a breadth of experience. And I moved around a little bit early in my career to gain those experiences. I did a stint in training and development. I did a stint in recruiting. Invaluable as you kind of grow. Most of my career was spent in business partnering. So there's no one right answer. I think it's what skills do you bring to the table, and what are the opportunities that would give you a chance to really show impact?
Awesome. Well, with that said, we're going to bring this to a close. Nancy, thank you so much for spending an afternoon with us, or evening. You're on the East Coast, and good night, everyone. So that's a wrap. Thank you so much. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
Anthony. Thanks.